main water supply right now, which is imported, is only going down, if anything.
Currently, LA dumps about 230 million gallons of non-drinkable but highly treated wastewater into the ocean every day. The city plans to treat all that wasted water to drinkable standards by 2035. That would provide 40% of LA's water needs, essentially replacing the amount the city imports from Northern California and the Colorado River. And it's not just LA. California cities, large and small, are investing more in recycling wastewater as traditional water supplies dry up. Back at Orange County's water recycling plant, Mehul Patel brings me to a steel sink. He turns on the faucet and pours me a cup.
This water that we're drinking today, probably about 30 hours ago, was raw sewage coming through the sewer collection system.
I have to admit, I hesitate before putting the cup to my lips.
Don't be biased by its origin. Think of it where it is now.
I slowly take a sip, and it tastes so good, it gives me hope for California's water future. For Here and Now, I'm Erin Stone.
And you're listening to Here and Now.
Next time on The World, hundreds of top political leaders from across China are gathered in Beijing. China's economic growth, its military strength, and its role on the world stage are all part of the discussions. But more than anything else, it's a showcase for the power and achievements of Chinese leader Xi Jinping. China's Communist Party Congress on The World.
You can hear The World Monday through Thursday at 3 on Radio IQ.
Support for Radio IQ comes from the 16 Hands Studio Tour earlier this year, October 22nd and 23rd in Floyd County, featuring contemporary pottery and woodworking. Details at 16hands.com. And from Hillcom, a wireless internet service provider for Dickinson County. Details at hillcom.tech. And from Sustaining Members, who contribute to Radio IQ on a monthly basis.
Funding for Here and Now comes from the listeners of WBUR Boston and from Indeed, designed to be an end-to-end hiring solution for businesses of any size to attract, interview, and hire candidates, all from one place. More at Indeed.com/NPR. And BetterHelp, connecting people with a therapist online for issues like depression and relationships. 25,000 therapists are available through BetterHelp using a computer or smartphone. BetterHelp.com/public.
It's Here and Now. The U.S. and Russia are facing off over leadership of a little-known international tech agency that's been around since the mid-1800s. The International Telecommunication Union was created to help standardize the telegraph, but it could be the place where the future of the Internet is decided. NPR's Jenna McLaughlin reports.
For Karen Kornblue, it's a question of a free and open Internet.
In countries around the world, can citizens really know what's going on in their own countries, abroad, and can they organize with each other, and can they be safe from surveillance?
Kornblue is a senior fellow at the German Marshall Fund. She's been closely watching an election an ocean away between an American and a Russian candidate. The American, Doreen Bogdan-Martin, touts unfettered Internet access for everyone.
My vision is to enable a trusted, connected digital future for all.
Her opponent wants countries to have more control over how their citizens connect.
I'm Rashid Ismailov, nominated by Russian Federation.
Both were vying to lead something called the International Telecommunication Union.
It's the most important agency you've never heard of.
The agency has been making sure people can communicate around the world since the 1860s, after something called the telegraph was invented.
In Paris, the rulers of an uneasy world came to terms, faced with a new machine which abolished time and space.
In the 1960s, the UN produced a short film to mark 100 years of the ITU.
Already, the lines of the telegraph stretched out and dared to cross the frontiers of sovereign states.
The ITU does a lot of important work. It's the reason your cell phone works at home as well as in Toronto or Tokyo. The ITU is also responsible for allocating radio bandwidth for everything from high-speed internet to HDTV.
A huge 82-inch and a 65-inch, 2 for $1, just $17.99. Wow.
These same kinds of technological advances helped me reach Ambassador Erica Barks-Ruggles in Bucharest.
If there weren't frequencies set aside for things like WhatsApp, which we're calling on, we wouldn't be able to do this either.
She's the head of the U.S. delegation to the ITU conference. The U.S. is backing Doreen Bogdan-Martin at a moment when competition with Russia and China in all domains is so intense.
She has a vision connecting the 2.7 billion unconnected people in the world.
In a first, President Biden threw his weight behind the American candidate. But in the Trump era and even before, dating back to 9/11, there was less focus on these obscure international agencies. The thing is, their members make a lot of really key decisions. Without the U.S. taking a lead role, Russia and China felt emboldened to push for their policies, including inside the International Telecommunication Union. One of those policies is to allow individual countries more power over how the internet works. In Bucharest, Erica Barks-Ruggles says the U.S. believes in total openness.
There are others who disagree with that, who would like to be able to control when their citizens can talk to other people and what they can talk to them about. Sometimes within their own countries. We've all heard about the Great Firewall, but also between countries.
Of course, when Russia and China are pitching their vision to other countries, they don't always sell it so bluntly.
Sometimes they go into a country, sure, and they say, this is a way for you to stifle dissent.
Justin Sherman is a fellow at the Atlantic Council.
But in many cases, they say the West has dominated the internet since its inception. Silicon Valley is out of control. This is not about empowering China. This is not about empowering Russia. This is about empowering you.
Getting back to that election in Bucharest, the reality is that the U.S. has been genuinely worried about the outcome. The result would be decided by a secret ballot, which means countries could vote in Russia's favor without anybody knowing. And so, on the morning of September 29th in Bucharest, the winner was announced.
Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen,
Doreen Bogdan-Martin prevailed. She got 139 votes out of 172, the first woman to be ITU's leader ever.
I am deeply, deeply humbled and filled with emotion.
Now, the work begins. Members of the ITU will meet until mid-October, talking about everything from artificial intelligence to cybersecurity. But Chinese companies like Huawei, they still want to take the lead in forging the future of 5G, setting the standards, convincing other countries that their vision is better. Justin Sherman at the Atlantic Council doesn't think it's going to be easy for the U.S.
The Chinese government will continue trying to influence the ITU. This victory is a good thing, but the hard work doesn't stop.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Mayor Lee is out of town on business, so I will be presiding over the meeting today. So I just want to say hello and welcome to our October 17, 2 p.m. meeting, and I will ask our clerk, Ms. McCoy, to call the roll, please.
Ms. Moon Reynolds.
Here.
Ms. Price. Ms. Sanchez Jones.
Here.
Vice Mayor White Boyd.
Here.
Mr. Bestpitch.
Here.
Mr. Cobb.
Here.
Mayor Lee is absent.
And a quorum is present. So once again, welcome, all you lovely faces. I just wanted to bring attention to my colleagues who are wearing pink in acknowledgement of Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Back in 1974, Betty Ford was diagnosed with cancer, and at that time it was pretty taboo. And in 1975, she designated a week for breast cancer awareness, and now we have an entire month which shows the importance of breast cancer among women and some men. About 1% of men have breast cancer, yes, but there's not a person in this room who is not impacted or affected with someone who has had breast cancer. So we just want to continue to raise that awareness. And moving on to our agenda, council meetings are televised and will be live and will be replayed on RVTV Channel 3 on Thursdays at 7 p.m. and Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. and video stream live through Facebook at facebook.com/Roanoke VA. Council meetings are offered with closed captioning for the deaf and hard of hearing. So at this time, I would like to ask Reverend William Ayers to come to the podium. He is going to do our invocation, and I will lead you in the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could please stand.
If you please bow your heads with me as I pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for all your many blessings. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and the honor for bearing appropriate responsibilities. I pray for our Vice Mayor, for the various levels of city officials, and in particular for this assembled council. I pray that you grant them wisdom to govern and a sense of welfare and the needs of the people. I pray for the ability to work together in harmony even when there is an honest disagreement. I pray for the agenda that is set forth today. Please give an assurance of what would please you and would benefit those who live and work in our beloved Star City. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Ayers. We appreciate that. Again, welcome to our 2 p.m. session. And we'll move on to the announcements. Building and Fire Code Board of Appeals, we have 2 vacancies. Youth Services Citizens Board, we have 3 vacancies. And you can access these vacancies through the city's homepage to complete an online application for the above-mentioned vacancies. And moving on to item number 2, we have some presentations and some acknowledgments. And I am going to ask Jillian Moore, Acting Director of Planning and Development, to join me at the podium with her staff. That means all staff? Thank you so much. This is certainly an honor because I've had the pleasure of working with Jillian personally, and she held my hand and walked me through a process, through the entire process, very professionally and very gracefully, and I just want to say thank you for that. You are truly an asset along with the rest of the team in the building and permitting department. I sincerely mean that. So I will go ahead with the Community Planning Month proclamation. Whereas change is constant and affects all cities, towns, suburbs, counties, boroughs, townships, rural areas, and other places. And whereas community planning and plans can help manage this change in a way that provides better choices for how people work, live, and whereas community planning provides an opportunity for all residents to be meaningfully involved in making choices that determine the future of their community. And whereas the full benefits of planning requires public officials and citizens who understand, support, and demand excellence in planning and plan implementation. And whereas American Planning Association endorses National Community Planning Month as an opportunity to highlight how planning is essential to recovery and how planners can lead communities to equitable, resilient, and long-lasting recovery. And whereas the celebration of National Community Planning Month gives us the opportunity to publicly recognize the participation and dedication of the members of planning commissions and other citizen planners who have contributed their time and expertise to the improvement of the city of Roanoke. And whereas we recognize the many valuable contributions made by professional community planners of the city of Roanoke and extend our heartfelt thanks for the continued commitment to public service by these professionals. Now, I therefore, Trish White Boyd, Vice Mayor of the City of Roanoke, Virginia, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2022 throughout this great 7-time All-America City as Community Planning Month in conjunction with celebration of National Community Planning Month. Thank you all. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. I didn't have a mic, but I'm loud enough. So would you like to say something? Either one of you, all of you? Anyone? Anyone? Everyone? No, you're not.
Whereas we'd like to get back to work.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I will give you that. Thank you, guys. Let's give a round of applause. Their hard work. And I have another presentation. I'm going to ask Ms. Waugh and I think it's Terry, or are they? Oh, yes. I was going to say, is this a two-pager? No. You can read it. Oh, okay. Okay. So this is good. Welcome. Hi. How are you guys? Well, we have a proclamation here for Chamber of Commerce Day. So this is really exciting. So whereas we have mumbling in the background, whereas Chambers of Commerce strive to address the community's top challenges and greatest opportunities through bold leadership and innovative problem solving, whereas Chambers of Commerce foster stronger, more vibrant communities by advocating for priorities to promote economic prosperity, boost quality of life, and create access to meaningful employment and opportunity for all residents. Whereas Chambers of Commerce are champions of communities serving as a trusted resource for businesses, residents, and other stakeholders, whereas Chamber of Commerce create community partnerships to build resilient economies and promote community-wide prosperity. Whereas the Roanoke Regional Chamber of Commerce was founded in 1889 and has grown to represent over 800 members, including businesses both large and small. Whereas the Roanoke Regional Chamber of Commerce is a leader of business climate issues to include advocacy for improvements to Interstate 81, investments in our region's innovation corridor, expansion of broadband internet infrastructure, income tax exclusion for Paycheck Protection Plan, loan forgiveness, and flexible health insurance and medical leave plans. And whereas the Roanoke Regional Chamber of Commerce invests in our region by hosting programs like Leadership Roanoke Valley to enrich local professionals with the knowledge and skills to be well-rounded community leaders. Now, therefore, I, Vice Mayor Trish White Boyd, on behalf of Sherman P. Lee Sr., Mayor of the City of Roanoke, encourages residents of Virginia's Blue Ridge region to learn more about the Chamber of Commerce, its impact and support of local businesses, and do hereby proclaim October 19, 2022, throughout this great 7-time All-America city as Chamber of Commerce Day. Congratulations to you both. You do wonderful work here in the city. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I have an actual proclamation for you. The actual real nice proclamation here. Excellent. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. Oh, did you want a picture? Okay, well, Mr. Cal, would you? And microphone. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, yeah, I do. And we have another special presentation. If I could get Mr. Jeffrey Powell. Hi, Mr. Powell. I don't know if you've seen this or not. I think Councilman Cobb's in the picture. Nice, nice, nice. Well, we're going to take it out. Everyone, meet Jeffrey Powell. Like so many locales, Roanoke has recently experienced an increase in violence. Jeffrey Powell, Director of General Services, was challenged by family members. What was he personally doing to help address this issue? Embracing the challenge, Jeffrey inquired of the city manager what he could do to help the police in their response. The city manager challenged Jeffrey to present a proposal at a leadership retreat. Jeffrey's proposal for a whole of government response was embraced by the directors, and under Jeffrey's leadership, prepared a plan of action. Using year-end surplus and later ARPA funding, the Star City Safe initiative was born. Star City Safe is an approach involving staff from various city departments, all under the leadership of Jeffrey. Focuses on youth, ensuring they have a safe and supportive environment in which to prosper, thereby lessening the likelihood of engaging in risky behaviors that could lead to being the victim or perpetrator of violence. The initiative includes extended supervised hours at library branches and recreation centers, movie and sports nights, mentoring services, job training and apprenticeships, conflict management training, and more. Mr. Powell is this year's winner not only because of his willingness to work outside his regular duties, but his obvious compassion for the residents of this city as a whole. Well done, and that was a great effort. He was actually recognized at the Virginia Municipal League Conference in Richmond and was not able to attend, but we were there in his stead, and it was so exciting to receive this award on behalf of Mr. Powell. And it is heavy, and so I will let you take that out. And yeah, it was pretty heavy. And if you want to turn this way and show our residents and the rest of the folks what that looked like. It's very nice. And I think Mr. Cobb might want a picture. Do you want Mr. Powell or? Okay, well, let me just put my hand on it.
While everybody else is standing up to honor this amazing man.
And I hope you will take a few minutes. Yes, please do. Take a few minutes too. And tell a little bit about the project. We just had a little synopsis, but it's an amazing project, and that was some great work that you all had done.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Bob for listening and providing me the resources. And of course, I can't do this without Clarence. He's quiet, but he's been in my corner and worked with me every day when I got discouraged. So I really appreciate that. And also Angie, she came by in the evenings and said, hey, we can do this. It's different, coming from the background. And in business and then having to come to this type of issue, it was a lot of stress. And also, we want to recognize, if you give me a few minutes, everyone, the team. I couldn't have done this by myself. As much said, it takes a village. Well, it took a village for us to put together this program. And it stands for all of the best in government, where everybody works together. So the first person I want to recognize is Lord Merchant and Captain Bodell. Lord, you want to say something? Because I mean, I couldn't have done this without you, okay? You and you're the soul of this program, and I'm going to bring the heart up in a minute.
Well, I'm just honored to be a part of this program. Mr. Powell, you've done a great job under your leadership, your commitment, and dedication. Without you in the forefront, I don't think this would have happened. And the way it happened is outstanding. I'm praying and hoping that we will continue this effort of these initiatives. And I always talk about sustainability. One of the people in my life, his name is Mr. Adolph Brown. He's a doctor, PhD, and he's a psychologist. And one of the things he taught me at a very young age when I first came into the Department of Juvenile Justice was he told us to remember the acronym LAW, L-A-W. Language, attitude, and behavior is one of the laws, and there was another one, loss, abandonment, and bereavement. The one that stuck with me is the loss, abandonment, and bereavement. And he said these are common characteristics in those individuals who are out here that they get themselves in trouble. And I'm saying that we've come into these kids' lives so they won't have to experience this loss, abandonment, and bereavement. And I pray and hope, pray to God that this will continue. We will continue to be a part of their lives and don't just come in temporarily and just leave them lost, abandoned, and bereaving. But thank you, Mr. Powell. Thanks for putting your trust in me and let me do this, do the things that I'm familiar with to help these kids and these families in this community. Thanks to the city manager and all folks that were involved in making this happen. Appreciate it.
The chief is, I think, away in Richmond. Is that right, Cal? So he's not able to join us. We also want to recognize the libraries, and Ms. Umberger is not here, but Ms. Bean is. And this is probably the person that next year I'm going to lean on Bob to nominate for something, because you should see her work.
But first and foremost, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to work with such outstanding leadership. They help our branch just shine with the youth. I mean, it's a lot of hard work. We are right there front and center, and we could not do it without you. There is not a time that I can say, hey, Mr. Powell, Mr. Merchant, I need some help. We are right there together, and with love, consistency, caring, and knowledge, we are able to help our youth. We see the results. It's small steps, but we see them. The whole attitude within 6 months has changed. And I am so thankful to be a part of it. And that's all I have to say. I'm just thankful.
We do have a couple of directors here, and I'm going to start out with Parks, because I wouldn't have been able to put this together without Michael's friendship and support from day one. He never laughs at me. He always says, do your thing, man, I'll help you. So I want to bring Michael up, because we couldn't do it, and let him introduce a very important person to this program.
Thank you. You know, my mentor shared with me that in order to be successful, you surround yourself with successful people. And that's really what we had here from top to bottom, all under Jeffrey's leadership, coordinating the group. It really was a group effort. And we were fortunate to be a part of it, you know, engaging these young people in some positive activities, because if we're not there to get them involved in that, they're going to get involved in something far else. And it's important to remember that we're in this for the long game here. You know, these are going to be long-lasting impacts. It's not going to result in these short results, but seeing how many people took advantage of something as simple as open gym at Eureka on a Wednesday night, and how impactful something as small as basketball can have on a young person's life. So, you know, Patrick Boas with me, he's our recreation manager. He was instrumental in getting those programs scheduled and all the different things we were able to put together and put forth. But again, thanks for the inclusion, and we're very fortunate to be a part of it.
You know, when Bob said all the directors, it meant all of them, but I have a couple more here. I want Brian Mann to talk about his experience. He actually gave the kids a tour of the Hotel Roanoke and the history of it, and then provided a, as my mother would say, who's watching, a full course meal. So I'm gonna give it to Brian.
Oh, thanks, Jeffrey. What an amazing program, and what a blessing to be a part of it. You know, in city government, sometimes it's a little bit challenging as public servants. Are we really making a difference? And for me, and for my scope of influence on the city, this is where we could really reach down and lend a hand to some kids who need some direction. And we had a great tour of the Hotel Roanoke. We had a meal. I'll be honest, a few of the kids didn't know what they were eating in the meal, so we tried to explain a few of the dishes to them. And I don't know if I would eat them all myself, but we had a good time. And the other part that we've been a part of is the internship and the paid apprenticeship. And we are on our second cohort of teen apprentices coming through the Hotel Roanoke, getting ready to start the third cohort of the paid internship. And what a way to impact the community is to bring young kids, young youth into our system, and really just give them knowledge on how to live a really successful life. And I can't wait to be a part of the next phase. So thank you.
Thank you. Hey, you know, Kevin Price is the Valley Metro General Manager, and we couldn't have gotten this done because he gave us, I don't know how much in services for these children to get them back and forth. He knows, so I'm gonna let him share. But Kevin Price.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. Under your leadership, man, this has been a great experience. And one of the things that Jeffrey and I talked about right before this meeting, is he told everyone that I was from Danville, Virginia. And being born and raised in Danville, Virginia, I had my experiences as a young African-American man in Danville, and Danville had its challenges. But to be a part of this in Roanoke is a blessing, and I thank Jeffrey for allowing transit to be a piece of the puzzle, man, and I appreciate it. And I congratulate you. I appreciate you, man. Thank you very much.
And we have Jillian here from Community Development, and Jillian sponsored an apprentice, so I wanted to recognize her. You don't want to back. You go ahead. Go ahead. Let them have it then. She's being humble. Okay. And the last folks from my group that I like to thank is all the directors, divisions in general services, and today recognize Nicole Gibson and Cynthia Tanks, who's here this afternoon to represent general services.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. You said this time shut it down. But thank you, because I had no idea that you had coordinated all of these different departments in your efforts. And I appreciate you taking the time to thank them and to recognize them, because I know some of us may not have known that you involved GRTC. Of course, we knew about the library. You can't go to the library on Wednesday without Miss Bean and about 50 kids there, which is a good thing. They have found a place to go, which is much better than being someplace on the street. So everything that you all have done has been very impactful, and you certainly deserve that award, and thank you for doing what you're doing, and I hope that we can continue. And please let us know, as council, what we can do to help facilitate that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's Bob gets the credit, because I wouldn't have known.
Let's see where we are here. And we are moving on to Item number 3 on the agenda, hearing of citizens upon public matters. City Council sets this time as a priority for citizens to be heard. All matters will be referred to the city manager for response, recommendation, or report to council as he may deem appropriate. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers signed up this afternoon?
We do. We have 2 speakers.
Okay.
The first person is Sean Ayers.
Okay. Mr. Ayers, if you would come forward, please. Good afternoon. Welcome.
I have a complaint about like 2 things.
Okay. Can you want to pull that mic down some so we can hear you?
Yeah, I have a complaint about 2 things, and the first one is an abandoned, it's a condemned property at 4707 Edgelawn Avenue. That's 4707 Edgelawn Avenue. The place is condemned. There's, the people that hang out in it, I guess, will go in and they'll tear off the boards on the house where the city's condemned it. There's drug use there. They're cooking meth in the house. There's prostitution all out of this condemned house. I've did a little bit of research into this property, and the owners of the said property are dead. I'm asking for the city to go in and deem it a blight and to raise the building, as it would reduce crime and all that in the neighborhood. I think there's human trafficking involved, but I'm not sure about that. And the place is an eyesore, but I want y'all to deem it a blight and a public nuisance and raise the place sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Mr. Ayers. Anything else? You still have some time if you want to.
Yeah, there's one other thing. I've been complaining to transportation now for 5 months. There's a big portion of the road near the sidewalk in front of 427 Arbutus that it's broken to 3 places, like big sections, and it's actually taller than the curb. And I've complained to them, and I've made numerous complaints to them to fix that portion of the street, and nothing's happening. It's been like 5 months. Not only is it unsafe for people and children, but that's a potential lawsuit against the city, and I've made numerous complaints and nothing. But that's in front of 427 Arbutus. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want you to know that our city manager is in the room, and the assistant city manager and our city attorney, so your concerns will be addressed and someone will get back with you.
Mr. Harris actually came by the office
okay.
last week. I spoke with you, and so we have had crews actually go out and look at the Arbutus. It's in the gutter pan in that area, so it is on the list of items to pay attention to. So, thank you.
Definitely looked at one property and made crime and everything else in that one neighborhood a whole lot better. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have, the next speaker is Scotty Smith. And seems to be, he's not
Mr.
here.
Smith, are you in the room?
No.
Okay. So we'll move on. Moving on to our consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine by members of City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate motion to discuss the items as, okay, I thought that was him coming in. If discussion is desired, the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. I would like to call attention to 3 specific requests. One from me, Vice Mayor, requesting that council convene in a closed meeting to discuss the 2022 Citizen of the Year Award pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A10, Code of Virginia 1950 as amended. And the second item is from the city manager requesting that council convene in a closed meeting to discuss the disposition of an approximately 1 acre portion of city-owned property located at 2424 Brambleton Avenue Southwest, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body, pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A3, Code of Virginia 1950 as amended. And the third request from the city manager requesting that council convene in a closed meeting to discuss the acquisition of property located in southwest area of the city near Franklin Road, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A3 Code of Virginia as amended. Is there a motion?
So moved. Consent agenda.
Madam Clerk, could you call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Moon Reynolds?
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Mr. Cobb? And Vice Mayor White Boyd.
Aye, and the consent agenda is approved. Moving on to our regular agenda. Item number 5, public hearings. There are none. Item number 6, petitions and communications. And we have a special presentation by Sunny Shaw on behalf of VAPS to share information with regard to the Diwali Festival of Lights and New Year activities. And this is sponsored by Council Members Bestfitch and Cobb. Mr. Shaw, are you ready? Is it an electronic presentation or is it?
Yeah, we have a thumb drive.
Oh, you have a thumb drive? Okay, I think you can just insert it in the side and move forward. And you have 10 minutes.
Sure, ma'am. First of all, I'm sorry, a little bit messed up. I'm a little bit late. So thank you for giving me opportunity. On behalf of BAPS Sanstha and Charities, I would like to thank you, Vice Mayor White Boyd, Councilman Bill Bestfitch, Councilman Cobb, Councilwoman Ms. Reynolds, and Councilwoman Ms. Sanchez for giving us this great opportunity to talk about the BAPS charities. I know in many of our activities, many of you or all of you have participated, but I just want to let the purpose of this meeting is to let the Roanoke City leadership and administration know what charitable activities BAPS is doing in this area, and also talking about upcoming Diwali festival. First of all, I want to mention Commonwealth of Virginia just became first state to declare October as a Hindu Heritage Month. We thank all the state delegates and senators for unanimously voting to make this thing happen. Indian community is rapidly growing at the rate of 7.6% in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and also in our region, Virginia's Blue Ridge region. Now we are close to 500 families from India, plus 100 families from Nepal and Bhutan who will be celebrating Diwali in our valley. BAPS Charities is a global volunteer-based charitable organization active in 9 countries across 5 continents. BAPS concentrates on 5 areas of charitable work: community development and empowerment, environment protection and prevention, health awareness, education seminars, humanitarian and disaster relief. We are active in Virginia's Blue Ridge and also around 76 cities across the America. Let me talk briefly about some of the projects done globally and mainly in our valley. You can see in the slide now, during the COVID outbreak, we distributed 175,000 PPE in US and India. 38,000 vaccination shots were administered in 38 BAPS centers in America. Within 10 days of Ukraine crisis, BAPS opened a kitchen and shelter facility at Poland border, serving 1,000 meals per day. BAPS Charities coordinate many walkathons for various charitable organizations. 3,500 people walked, covered 200 million steps in 74 centers, including Roanoke, within the last year. Locally, some events, we all know, most of you were there, we organized recently a cancer walk to create cancer awareness and raise funds for Susan G. Komen Cancer Foundation. Some of you joined us in the event and to support the cancer patients and families. In 2021, last year, we had virtually walked and BAPS Charities donated $75,000 to the Susan G. Komen Cancer Foundations. So thank you all for coming in our cancer walk. And this is now an environmental walk. We organized before cancer walk, the environmental walk in our city. Thanks to the administration for the last moment giving us opportunity to walk in our Roanoke sidewalks. This was organized to support the American Nature Conservancy Agency in their global planting of 1 million trees. We raised and donated close to $280,000 to this noble project and helped them to plant 1 million trees in the area. Next slide is COVID vaccination. When Roanoke started mass COVID vaccination drives at the Berglund Center, BAPS volunteers attended those drives and distributed granola bars, water bottles, and encouraged people to get vaccines. We also helped so many seniors in filling out those vaccination forms. Many of them were very complicated, and provided rides to seniors to the vaccination centers at the Berglund Center. We organized health fair with the help of several local doctors from various fields, pharmaceuticals, nurses, and provided health education, healthy diet guidance, and administered free flu shots. This is done every year in our valley, and these all activities are open to everybody. Anyone can come in. And the last, we had first time we arranged a blood drive in Roanoke and collected 29 pints of blood for the American Red Cross. Nationwide in September, we collected 4,000 pints of blood, which will in turn help save 12,000 lives in America. Our next drive will be somewhere in April 2023. And Diwali celebration. Diwali festival, which is also known as Festival of Lights, will be celebrated all around the world, including Virginia's Blue Ridge on October 29th at BAPS Center in Salem, Virginia. Diwali originated as a harvest festival that marked the end of growing season before winter, and the word Diwali means the row of lamps. And the holiday celebrates the victory of good over evil, light over darkness, knowledge over ignorance, as well as the Hindu New Year starts on the next day. Diwali is celebrated for 5 nights every year, where celebrants light small oil lamps, place them around the home along with other festive decorations, and pray for health, knowledge, peace, happiness, hope, and wisdom for everybody. We would like to extend our invitation to you all and our local communities to come and join us in celebration on October 29 at BAPS Temple. These are some slides for the community project we do at the temple during this year, time of the Diwali, and these are the slides. Thank you all for coming in. This is, we have a Festival of India, another big event done at the Elmwood Park. It is done under India Heritage Society every year in August, and we also celebrate India's Independence Day. This is the organization, this is the event. We try to bring all community together and promote diversity in our Virginia's Blue Ridge region. We also have, after this, another event coming up after Diwali, which is our Guru, Pramukh Swami Maharaj Centennial Celebration, which is at the Northside High School on November 19th. And I again extend invitation to all of you to come with your families. He was a leader, and he was a servant of humanity. He served all regardless of race, religious, social, economic, spiritual status. The story of his life is written with the ink of his selfless actions and his love for all beings. His teachings live on through the countless lives that he has nourished around the world. This is his legacy. That is what makes him relevant today. This is why he is timeless guru, and we want to celebrate all around the world in November his legacy. So please join us in celebrating, and we appreciate your time. And once again, sorry for coming late. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Shaw. If
you.
you want to hold on just a second, I will ask my colleagues if they have any questions. We really appreciate you coming and sharing that information. Mr. Bestfitch?
Well, thank you very much. I just want to express my sincere appreciation for all you have done over many years now with the charity projects and with the Indian Heritage Festival to bring the people in your community feel more like a part of all of our community, that we're all here together. And I think you've done a great job to get that point across to all of us. And I just want to say thank you. And I really like the idea of celebrating light.
Thank you.
I'm a person who enjoys the summertime more than any other month, more than any other season. The fall to me is a time when the sun goes down earlier every evening and comes up later every morning. So I appreciate the celebration of light.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Mr. Bestfitch, and thank you for all of your support for so many years to the Festival of India and our other activities. I just forgot to mention, we have some samplers for everybody, food outside. Please try it. It's a celebration of Diwali, okay? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shaw. And we look forward to break and sampling. Moving on to item 7, reports of the city officers and comments of the city manager. Mr. Cowell, I understand we have a briefing from the greenhouse gas emissions report. Is that going to be up next?
Yes, ma'am, that is up next. This is our annual report of the greenhouse gas emissions and the work that is going on. It will be presented by our still relatively new Sustainability Outreach Coordinator, Leanne Watsonfeld, and Dr. McGinnis. And Leanne is also going to talk a little bit about kind of steps after the greenhouse gas emissions, which deal with the Climate Action Plan as well. So with that, Leanne.
Vice Mayor and City Council, again, I'm Leanne Weizenfeld, new to the Sustainability Coordinator position, and it is my honor to introduce Dr. Sean McGinnis.
Okay, hold on just a second, Leanne. Is her mic on?
Should be.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
I don't really hear it. It doesn't, yeah. Okay, maybe it's just, maybe it's just up here, but it's, yeah, I don't. Okay, yeah, maybe you need to go, yeah.
It sounds like it's the speakers.
Yeah, it might be.
Should I use that one?
No, you're probably fine. I don't want to mess up your presentation.
Well, I
but
want everybody to hear it.
I know, and I think she's gonna. It's on. Okay, it just doesn't normally sound. It sounds low. Okay, you go ahead.
So it is my honor to introduce Dr. Sean McGinnis. He is Director of Green Engineering Program at Tech and the Associate Professor of Practice. And so we have been fortunate to have his assistance to analyze and to the community greenhouse emissions for about 15 years. So we are very happy to have his expertise and experience. So I will turn it over to him.
Thank you. Some of you I've seen before, so I'm happy to be here again, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about greenhouse gases and their role in the continuing climate crisis that we have. I am a Roanoke citizen, and I've been fortunate to be able to help the city work on this project for the last 15 years, as Leanne has said. So I'm going to give you a brief review. Some of you have seen some of this before, but I think it's good to put it into context. Then we'll talk about the data we have. We'll make some conclusions, and then Leanne will finalize with kind of action plans for the city going forward. Just as a reminder, there have been several council resolutions. This is the resolution in 2016, which set a reduction for the city to be met by 2024, so I'm going to come back to that in a minute. And then this is the resolution in 2021, which set the city and its staff upon the plans of making a climate action plan to deal with the emissions that we have and to try to reach the goals that we're setting. So those are the context for this. We've been doing this for a long time, long enough, in fact, that when I went to fix this slide, I've realized I don't really have enough room anymore. So for next year, I'm going to need another way to show this. But this started in 2005, 2006, and we've had several sets of resolutions where goals have been set, measurements have been taken, analysis has been done, and we have been successful. But it is critical that we continue this success. And if you don't have measurements of this data, you're just kind of guessing as to what to do next, and we'd rather not guess. We'd rather have some scientific background and metrics in order to make the best decisions with the limited resources we have. There's a lot of data in these slides. You have a copy of them to look at them, and they'll also will be following up on this in the next few weeks, kind of a full report, which can be read in more detail and questions can be asked. So just as a reminder, this is the concentration of carbon dioxide measured at the mountaintop in Hawaii. This has been being done since the 50s and the 60s, and you can see carbon dioxide continues to increase. This is due to the burning of fossil fuels for the most part, although there are other factors involved in this. The variation you see from year to year is the carbon dioxide coming out of the atmosphere as the leaves and the trees and the plants grow, and then in the fall, when the leaves and the trees start to decompose, they give the carbon dioxide back to the atmosphere. So you can see that periodic variation, but on top of that is this general increase. And from this increase, we can make some conclusions as to what's going on. You can also see the baseline where we started, where the carbon dioxide concentration was approximately 380 parts per million. And now in June of this year, we were up over 420 parts per million. And these are small amounts, but the system and our atmosphere are in equilibrium. So small changes to equilibrium can have big impacts, and we're starting to see the results of these around the world in all sorts of different cases. The U.S. government has a climate assessment. I won't read those two paragraphs. It's a long 100-page document, but I pulled out a couple key things which say we do not yet have approached the scale we need to reduce these problems, and these problems are not just the environment, they're the health and the economics and security of all of our communities in our nation. These are the results from the International Panel for Climate Change 6th report, which was published both in 2021 and 2022. This one's probably 1,000 pages. A couple key points here is that humans are unequivocally influencing the climate. Climate science, which models what is going to happen if these predictions keep happening, is getting better and better, so we have tighter understanding of what's going to happen. If we stop everything we're doing right now, we are locked into at least 30 years of warming, because carbon dioxide stays in the atmosphere for a long time. Once it's up there, it doesn't disappear very quickly. So even if we reduce very quickly, the problem with temperatures, rising seas, melting ice, all of those things will continue. We do have a short window in which we can mitigate some of the most troubling predictions, but we have to act fast and we have to act at a large scale quickly. For Roanoke specifically, this shows what temperatures are predicted to look like from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. They're also the folks that do the hurricanes and a lot of the climate modeling. And you can see that these temperature increases don't look like a lot, but small changes to the ecosystem and to cities make a big difference. And the one thing that people don't really realize until you look at the data is that in the U.S., heat-related injuries and deaths are larger than all other natural disasters combined. And especially it affects the lower socioeconomic parts of cities, especially urban areas where we don't have the resources and temperatures are even higher due to the urban heat effect. So, based on that background, we have for the last 15 years collected data and checked our progress and then made goals and initiatives to try to reduce greenhouse gases. This uses the city limits. Our baseline year is now 2016. We started in 2005, but due to various data changes over the years, we have adjusted the baseline, so we're basing everything based on 2016, but we also have data that goes from 2016 back to 2005, so we can add those gains for those two periods. It looks at utility billing records for the entire city. It looks at vehicle miles traveled through VDOT, and it looks at fuel and energy records, and the city staff have been super helpful in pulling all that. This is a lot of data. It takes some time and energy to pull it together in order to do the analysis. So we're looking back in time at what happened in the previous year, and then we're trying to make models to reduce what is going to happen in future years. We use some software that the city has access to through a membership. And AEP has made some changes to the way they produce their data, and that's one of the reasons that we changed the baseline from 2016. So this is all of the electricity data yearly from 2005, and you can see a general trend downward. It is broken up into residential, commercial, industrial, and other. And the one big takeaway from the pie chart there on the right here is that residential, community, and industrial are all about a third. So it's not like there's any one sector of our economy that can say, well, if we fix this, the rest of it's fine. We've got to fix all of them kind of at the same time. And the things you would do are different for the residences, the community, commercial businesses, and then the big industries. We do have an electricity reduction of almost 4% since 2016. But if we want the city to grow, that takes energy. And so if the city is going to keep growing, and we expect that, that means we have to do something to reduce the emissions while allowing us to still use the energy we need to have a growing, vibrant city. This shows natural gas. The trend is similar. All three of the sectors of the community are big factors in the use of natural gas. This is primarily typically for heating. And you can see this is a little bit more variable. You don't see a continuous small decrease, and this is due to the variation in the weather year over year. So a lot of this is dependent on how much heating we need in the winter. So there are warmer winters and cooler winters. We had an increase since 2016 for 2021, and this is a little bit surprising because the last winter was actually cooler. So there's some other sector we're analyzing to see why we're getting more natural gas use even though the winter season was a bit cooler. This shows vehicle miles traveled. Some good news here. We've got an almost 8% reduction in total vehicle miles estimated in the city of Roanoke over time. And this goes up and down a bit with the economy and with the price of fuel. So in 2019, we were down almost 8%. And you can see this varies by what road you're riding on and what kind of road it is. One thing to note as we start talking about electric vehicles is this data gets much harder to analyze because currently VDOT is not analyzing by vehicle. So if the vehicle is on the road, it gets counted. But if it's electric, it's not using fuel, it's using electricity instead. So we'll have to adjust for that going forward as the percentage of electric vehicles goes up. So this is the final, most important piece. This is greenhouse gases. These are proportional to temperature rise in the atmosphere. You can see we have a reduction from 2016 to 2021. In the community, it was 13.5% since 2016. This is actually beyond the target that we last set, which was 12% or 10% for the community and a little higher for the city itself. So we've already beaten our 2024 goal, which is great news. But going back to my context earlier, none of the communities in the country are going fast enough, so we've just got kind of a head start. But this is great news, and what it says is we probably have to revise what our targets are because we're already ahead of 2024. And this is due both to two things. One, it's due to our local utilities, especially Appalachian Power and APCO, reducing the amount of coal and natural gas that they're using in the electricity we get. So that's the piece that's a bit out of our control. The piece that's in our control is our demand for electricity through energy efficiency, through just not using as much. So this reduction is a combination of those two things. And in order to hit the goals going forward, we need both of those things. We need the utilities to continue to have better energy sources, and we need citizens, businesses, and large industry to reduce the amount of energy they use by still maintaining, productivity, quality of life, and health. So just to finalize before I turn it over to Leanne, who will talk about city-specific initiatives. We've already hit our 2024 commitment, which is great. The models predict that that's not quite good enough, and many of the most progressive cities are now targeting a 50% reduction by the year 2030, which is super aggressive, but it is the goal which the climate modelers say we need to hit if we want to minimize the amount of health, economic, and social damage just due to rising temperatures and changing in climates. We've got some powerful software that can help us model, which we've just started using in the last year or two. And the city council staff have been super helpful with this. It's your leadership, your vision, and your support that allow these things to continue. So in order to hit a 50% reduction, we have to redouble our efforts, and all of this helps not only from kind of a temperature point, which gets in the news, but it helps your citizens because it helps their health, it helps their pocketbook, and it helps their overall kind of quality of life within the city. So I'll stop here. I'll let Leanne make a few comments, and then I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about the progress that we have made as a municipality on our greenhouse gas emissions. I want to go over some of our local vulnerabilities with you, our top polling concerns here in the United States, and then our risk pathway. So we've made a lot of good progress between 2016 and 2019, specifically for the municipal activities. We have reduced natural gas usage by 10%, and that's probably due to facilities doing such a great job replacing old boilers. Street lights have gone down by 14% due to conversion to LEDs. Now, I want to call out the street lights are our #1 energy usage in the city, greater than any building specifically. So they are very, very important as we look to reduce emissions. Our gas fixture has reduced by almost 8%. That might have something to do with fleet size, gained efficiencies, and then conversion to some propane mowers. And then our biggest decrease is our diesel, our biodiesel mix has gone down by almost 18%. And that's due to converting our ambulances from diesel to gas. We've also purchased more trucks that run on gas as opposed to diesel. So those are our top accomplishments in the last few years. So I want to touch on some of our vulnerabilities. Like Dr. McGinnis said, health is going to be a big, big issue, especially here. The data that I'm sharing has come out of the Carillion 2021 annual report. We have 10% of our city population that has asthma, 9% has respiratory disease, and 8% has heart disease. And so when the air quality decreases, primarily through that increase in heat and solar radiation hitting particles from fossil fuel burning, it turns into a ground level ozone or smog. And so our increase in heat and the complexity of climate change is really going to worsen our respiratory issues here. Mental health is huge. It goes beyond just our moods. It influences our social behavior, cognitive function, academic performance, our sense of control and well-being. Heat plus stress, like we have just experienced with COVID, we've seen that in real time. It's fresh in our minds. It led to increased interpersonal aggression and violence. Our violent crime went up, rapes went up, and that just adds to as a stress, and so it really affects mental health. Our outdoor workers, our student athletes, those of us who enjoy outdoor recreation, are going to have a challenge with maybe additional heat stress and exhaustion. Carillion did a study on ER visits between 2010 and 2017. It was a retroactive study looking at data for ER visits that were related to heat waves. They found a statistically significant increase of people that went to the ER, mostly men, communities of color, and children. There was a significant increase during those heat waves. We're going to have an increase in vector-borne diseases as things move up from the southern hemisphere. And then this one, as I was researching the Climate Action Plan, this was a surprise to me. I did not realize how much air quality and heat played on the outcomes of pregnancy. The particulate matter, PM 2.5 and 10, really cause an issue with preterm and low birth rate. So this is something else that we will need to pay attention to. This layer of this map that's up is a map layer from CDC showing the city of Roanoke and our socially vulnerable communities. The CDC uses about 15 different social economic matrices to create this. And when you add our urban heat island layer over top of our vulnerable communities, you see that our hottest communities are also our most vulnerable communities. And so we really, really need to pay attention to this. These communities are also subject to higher energy costs, or maybe they don't have air conditioning at all to cool off. They may not have health care to go to the emergency room under heat stress. So climate change is thought by many leading public health agencies to be the greatest public threat facing humanity. And so as Dr. McGinnis alluded, it's all about the speed and scale that we react at this point. We are now at a pivotal point in time where our reaction is going to influence health for hundreds of years. This is, and I'll briefly go through this is just a public poll that Pew Research Center does. You've got a copy of it in your presentation. These are the top things that people in the United States are most concerned about. I have taken the liberty of highlighting those that climate change is going to increase the complexity of solving or the cost to work on it. 13 out of 18 of those are going to increase due to climate change. Okay, so this is probably the most important slide here. How much will it change? And really goes back to that speed and scale to which humanity acts. So we could have, going back to 1970s when we knew climate change was happening, we could have done a reduced emissions by about 10% every decade. It would have been easy. But we did not do that, and now we're cramming for the test. That's the best analogy I've got. We're cramming for the test. So this is a map. I'll draw your attention to the beginning here, these middle numbers. The RCP is the relative concentration pathway. So it's basically a modeled projection of greenhouse gas increases based on mitigations taken to reduce the greenhouse gases. And I'll put it in plain English. Imagine I was holding up a string of Christmas lights, and I've got one light held in my hand. And that one light represents 1 watt per meter squared. So 1 watt by about 10 by 10. And we have these boxes lined up, touching each other all around the Earth. And that 1 watt per meter squared represents the forcing or the energy that we are adding to the Earth's climate system. Now, it only took 1 watt to take us out of the last ice age, right? So that is what these numbers here mean. Right now, we don't have 1 watt, we have 8.5. This is how we're behaving now. This is how our human systems are. We're lowering emissions a little. We're working on it. But we're primarily using coal-fired power. Here locally with AEP, 60% of our electricity is generated through coal. We're primarily using fossil fuel cars and trucks. And what that's going to do is it's going to increase our temperatures and increase our extreme weather, increase sea level rise, but most importantly, it's going to increase our costs long-term to adapt our social systems, our houses, deal with our health effects, deal with the economy. It's going to cost us a lot more if we stay here, right? So if we go down to the bottom row, this is perfection, right? We work really, really hard as a civilization to lower our greenhouse gases by doing renewable energy, and then we use our technology to capture our carbon. We use public transportation, we use bicycles, we use electric vehicles, and that's going to keep everything on the right-hand side, that's going to keep everything down here about the same as it is now, right? We're starting to see some climate change effects, but it's not really an emergency. That might not be a good word, but it's not like the scenario at the top. So this is what we as a city should be looking at. We're going to need to work really, really hard. I want to have our goal, like Dr. McGinnis mentioned, in order to keep our emissions below 1.5 degrees, or at 1.5 degrees, no more than 2, we're going to have a 50% reduction below that or above that 2016 baseline. So we're going to need to prioritize funding to do renewables and to increase our electric vehicles, our safe bike routes. And I've included, I did my circle big so we could have our public transportation in here too. And what that will do is allow us to adapt better over time, and there won't be as many stressors. So that is what I've prepared for you. Do you have any questions for Dr. McGinnis or myself?
Anybody have any questions? No? Vivian, did she?
I would like to refer, hold on a second, let's get too far. To the slide where the asthma and respiratory issues are a big issue. Would you say that it's at southeast or northeast, northwest?
So our most socially vulnerable areas are kind of right there in the middle, just above the Roanoke River, in northwest and then southeast. Okay. Part of that is due to the railroad, but it does go substantially. That you're correct. The most socially vulnerable areas are the hottest areas.
Okay. Thank you.
Leanne, I just have a quick question for you. This slide here, are you talking citywide, or is this just for the city's usage?
This is just for the municipality.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. And also, on your very last slide, where you show where we want to be, or where we would like to be in the future, do you have, or is there a place for our residents to go to look for recommendations on how we can move toward reducing our emissions?
Yes, I plan to put as much as I can in the climate action plan.
Okay.
I've already started working on it. I don't get to work on it as often as I would like, but my goal is to have it a draft for peer review by the beginning of the year. That is my goal.
Oh, well, that will be great. So we need to know what we're working towards and how we can help make this happen for you. Thank you.
I think there also, if it's still not up there, we did something a few years ago where we came up with an action list of things that citizens could do.
Yeah, that would be
And it started
great.
out with really easy things like turning your thermostat down, which doesn't cost any money, to medium things like buying new appliances, to then higher end things like solar panels and electric vehicles. So there was actually something on that list that everybody could do. And what we asked is that everybody just do something more than they did the year before. And that doesn't put the burden on anybody particular, but asks us all to do just a little bit more. So we'll double check that
Yeah.
that list is still there.
Make sure it's still there and get it to our communications person, our new communications person, that maybe she can get it out. It just needs to keep resurfacing so that we're all on the same page. Mr. Cobb?
Thank you both for this update. Dr. McGinnis, on the slide about the CO2, you made a statement that I think was really impactful to me, and I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit on it. When you said small changes to equilibrium can have a large impact, what might that look like here locally? I mean, we think about this globally and nationally, but what might some of those small changes, how are we seeing those reflected, and what might we do to address those?
I think if you look at some of the diagrams that Leanne had, there are things that are community-wide and that are easier. So this idea of like reducing how much energy you need. So I think the thermostats are a good one because it doesn't require anybody to buy anything. The other thing is public transit, right? Every trip we don't take are gallons of fuel that are not burnt. And they're also dollars in people's pockets, right? So a lot of these things, you get multiple benefits. You get an economic benefit, you get a health benefit, because if you've got 30 people on the bus rather than one person driving a car, you have fewer emissions overall. And then you have long-term climate change impacts, because every gallon of fuel that we do not burn, every kilowatt hour we do not use, are emissions that are not ending up in the atmosphere. So there's a lot of things, and from a technology point of view, we should be hopeful. But we all need to act. Everybody's talking about climate change now, so the awareness is higher, but it really requires all of us to be thinking every week, what could I do this week that eliminates a trip or reduces some energy use? So it's all of these things that have multiple benefits at the same time. A lot of times people think of this as you're always losing something, but I think of it always as we're gaining something. It does take a little sacrifice, but what we gain in the long term in all of these categories is so much more than, slight changes to our behavior.
Yeah. And I think, I guess for both of you, just this is more of a point of reflection, the connection between economy and growth and environment. I know we just completed the streetscape on Melrose, and I counted 30 new trees. 30 as part of that streetscape, and that's in the heart of the heat map index and the heart of the social vulnerability. And I know as a council, we've supported increasing tree planting budgets, and trees make a significant impact in that, but I know that's not the only thing. So I think what's critical is when we're thinking about planning and considering economic growth, what are the direct correlations to the environment? How can the environment influence what we do economically? How can what we do economically influence what we do environmentally? And do everything we can to bring those together, to consider not only our growth economically, but our growth in health and wholeness for our whole community.
Yeah, and these new modeling packages that we have access to now allow us to look at these things like a tree planting today. And obviously there are budget issues. You can't do all of these things today, but the things you can do today, as alluded to by Leanne, are things that will cost 10 times more to do in the future. So, it really is this, spend a little bit more money now or spend a lot of money in the future, and in the meantime, you have more people that are sick, and, the cost of some of these things that are less tangible, right, the cost of health, the cost of quality of life, the ability to bring new people into the city, those have cost as well, and they're a harder piece to put numbers on. But things like trees, for a relatively low cost on the front end, help you in 3 or 4 different categories.
Well, and I would also add that
where we hear about resistance for safe bicycle passage in the city, this is an important argument to be made. If we're trying to reduce our carbon emissions and open safer pathways for public transit, for bicycle safety, these are things we have to think differently about, and not just thinking about cars first, but other vehicles and pedestrian safety, as more people may want to walk, or even mobility safety if people are in mobility devices like wheelchairs.
Yeah, and tied to that is this idea of kind of a culture change, because what really has to happen is the next generation has to do like 100 times better than this generation and the previous generation. So when the young folks see that you're recycling and you have safe ways to not get in a car, and there are trees in parks and the water is clean, right? That those things compound, and that changes a whole generation of people. So the educational piece of this, which is something we haven't mentioned, is intimately tied in.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Oh, you do, Ms. Moon Reynolds.
Thank you. You all have said a lot, and I'm trying to digest it all. I did have, one thing I did want to ask was under your summary and recommendations, I think it's under for you, Leanne. At this point, and rather sooner than later, I guess my question is, what is it we should be looking at now? I saw where you had it is recommended that the city should make a new aggressive target of 50%. Is that something an action council should be taking? Or you just wanted to just let us know that as a summary, or is that a recommendation?
That will be in the climate action plan.
Okay, so when you put the plan together that you're going to bring back. Now with employees working from home, does that, to me, in my mind, it increases more along with what you're talking about, those emissions, because they're at home versus where they would be at work. So for them, other than lowering your thermostat, we're creatures of habit. We want what we want, and we're going to do what we want. And because of that, it's like what Dr. McGinnis just said, we've got to look at that cultural change. So I'm just looking at how do we start now, I guess put it in simpler terms. How do you start now? Right. Getting public to understand that this is really serious and that we really need to be looking at it.
I think that you hit the nail on the head. We're just going to need to adjust our thinking, right? 10 years ago, we never would have been able to work remotely, but now it is part of our daily, it's a 50% if you choose to do that. And those kind of measures will add up. Hopefully, one day I will be able to measure what that means in greenhouse gas emissions and be able to have that for you. Not there yet, but that is the kind of thing we need to do, is thinking outside the box, like Mr. Cobb mentioned. And we're working on this. Transportation is working on the Safe Streets for All. Our thinking needs to go beyond having a pathway on the side of the road for bikes, because only a small percentage of us are going to ride in that pathway. It doesn't feel safe. So we need to reimagine what bike commuting could look like. Where's that space going to come from? Can we grow our greenways to help accommodate that? And so these are all things that we're going to be looking at.
Okay, thank you.
You're going to be quite busy with
Yes,
that
you are.
climate action
I'm
plan.
going to need some help.
Well, we've got
we're
plenty of
here to
help
offer
here.
that help.
Got
Yes.
plenty of help here.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry we used so much time.
No, it was good.
No, it was worth the time.
Good. And we're going to move on to item number 7A, acceptance of Virginia Department of Transportation Local Revenue Sharing Fund for the Hollins Library Road Drainage Improvement Projects. There are two measures, a resolution and a budget ordinance.
I move the resolution. Second.
Madam Clerk, could you read the title paragraph?
A resolution authorizing the acceptance of the Virginia Department of Transportation Local Revenue Sharing Funds Grant for the Hollins Liberty Road Drainage Improvement Project, and authorizing the execution and filing of appropriate documents to obtain such funds.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask clerk if you could call the roll.
Ms. Moon Reynolds?
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Mr. Cobb?
Aye.
Vice Mayor White Boyd?
Aye, and the resolution passes. There's a budget ordinance.
I'll offer the budget ordinance.
Is there a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk, would you read the title paragraph, please?
An ordinance to appropriate funding from the Virginia Department of Transportation funds to the Hollins Liberty Road Improvements Project, amending and reordaining certain sections of the 2022-2023 Stormwater Fund appropriations, and dispensing with the second reading by title of this ordinance.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'd ask the clerk to call the roll.
Ms. Moon Reynolds?
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Mr. Cobb?
Aye.
Vice Mayor White Boyd?
Aye, and the budget ordinance passes. Moving on to item B, an ordinance to implement a sign-on bonus for the Sheriff's Department. There is one measure, and that is an ordinance.
Move the ordinance.
Second.
Madam Clerk, could you read the title paragraph?
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to institute a program to pay up to 25 deputy sheriff recruits a sign-on bonus of $5,000 to become deputy sheriffs with the Roanoke City Sheriff's Office, and dispensing with the second reading of this ordinance by title.
Is there any discussion?
If I could, just to give a little bit of explanation
Yes,
with
please.
this. First, I want to thank Sheriff Hash for working with us on identifying ways in which we could continue to help support him in his recruitment efforts. This is one of those. We did this, you all helped us do this last year with this current budget with the police department, which has a similar bonus already in place and has been using that bonus. And actually, the fire department does as well for certified paramedics that might join our organization as well. So this is kind of that next step, as it indicates. It would enable up to $5,000 for each of those recruits coming in, for up to 25 recruits. Obviously, I don't anticipate getting 25 recruits in a single year, so it's probably something we'll look at carrying over into a subsequent year as well as we move forward. So that's just a little bit of background of this information. And the next item, I'll explain a little bit more on that item as well. So thank you.
Let me just ask you one question, Mr. Cowell. With that $5,000 bonus, would they get that all at one time, or would it be in increments based on some?
If we follow it the way we've done with the police, what it'll be is at the conclusion of, so they'll come in as a recruit, there'll be an agreement to receive that bonus, and then once they complete their recruit status and actually move out, then that's when they receive the bonus, and it is at one time. They get
At
it
one
all
time? Oh, okay, so it's not
And there
like
is
that.
there is a commitment for work, so they have to stay with the office for a certain period of time. Otherwise, they would have to pay back a portion of it. Very similar to what we currently do with PD.
Okay, so it's pretty much the same thing. Thank you. Is there any other questions? Or hearing none, Ms. McCoy, I'd ask you, go ahead and call the roll.
Ms. Moon Reynolds?
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Mr. Cobb?
Aye.
Vice Mayor White Boyd?
Aye, and the ordinance passes. Item C, an ordinance to implement a tenure compensation adjustment for the Sheriff's Department, and there is actually one measure. It's an
Move the
ordinance.
ordinance.
Second.
Madam Clerk, would you read the title paragraph?
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to institute a tenure adjustment program to increase the base pay for all incumbent sworn deputy sheriffs who have been employed by the City of Roanoke Sheriff's Office for a minimum of 3 years with a cap of 30 years as of August 1st, 2022, providing an effective date and dispensing with the second reading of this ordinance by title.
Is there any discussion, or you wanted to elaborate,
If
Mr.
I can
Cowell?
elaborate a little bit on this one as well. Again, I want to thank Sheriff Hash for working with us on this, and also in this case, thank the General Assembly and the Governor, because they made this possible. And it's a little bit convoluted, so I'll explain somewhat how we got here and some of the other pieces that accompany this as well that don't necessarily require similar council action. You all know that in this budget year, you approved two things with the Sheriff's Department in terms of compensation. One of those was a minimum of a 5% pay increase for all of the deputies. That went into effect July 1. That was a locally approved action. And you also approved phase 2 of the 3-phase step pay plan program that was in place. In some cases, that meant certain deputies received more than the 5%, but no one received less than the 5%. Of course, at that time, you'll recall, the state had not yet finalized their budget and certainly had not approved their budget. They subsequently approved their budget with a number of actions affecting sheriff's deputies. One of those was increasing the starting pay. One of those was to ensure that all deputies received at least a 5% pay increase across the entire state who are covered under the compensation board. So some of our deputies are completely locally funded and others are reimbursed by the state. And they also authorized this tenure-based pay system, again, for all of those that are eligible under the compensation board. What we've been able to do, since you already had approved and we budgeted the 5% pay increase independent of the action taken by the state, what we're able now to do is take some of our local dollars that are now being covered by the state, and we're applying the increase, starting pay, the tenure-based pay, across all of the positions. So everyone, whether they're comp board positions or locally funded positions, will receive both the increase, the 5% increase. Of course, they've already been receiving that since July 1, and they'll also receive this tenure-based increase that's covered in the ordinance as well. I'll have more in my comments that kind of put this in the larger context of all of the public safety pay increases you need, but that's what this one is specifically addressing, is the tenure-based pay that was approved by the General Assembly and funded by the General Assembly as well.
That's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
If there aren't any other questions, I'll ask the clerk to go ahead and call the roll.
Ms. Moon Reynolds?
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Mr. Cobb?
Aye.
And Vice Mayor White Boyd?
Aye, and the ordinance passes. Now it's time for comments by our city manager. Mr. Cowell, you want to go forward with your comments?
Thank you. Yeah, and I apologize. This is going to take a little bit of time to work through, so hopefully you'll give me a few minutes to
Take
do
your
this.
time.
But I thought it was important in light of, and this kind of builds off of the information that the actions we just took relative to the Sheriff's Department. So I wanted to kind of sort of bring back and kind of level set the actions that you have taken over the last couple of years and we're still taking. And there's a few other actions that we're taking administratively that I need to make certain you're already aware of it because you've received this information in your update a few weeks ago, but also want to make certain that folks are aware, and also that if you have any questions regarding that as well. So starting back in 2020, you and we started on a process of increasing our public safety compensation, and that was for a variety of reasons. That's included a series of one-time bonuses, as well as an increase in starting pay and the implementation of the aforementioned public safety step pay plan. To date, these actions have increased public safety compensation by over $8 million, in addition to over $4 million in one-time bonuses. So those are increases in compensation since the action started in 2020. I'm going to start with the Sheriff's Office and just kind of work through some of the actions. And again, this one's a bit convoluted because alongside the actions you're taking, the state has been taking actions as well. Again, most of the deputies are covered under the compensation board, which means we get a portion of their costs covered by the state. We often supplement that with some local funding, and then there are certainly positions that are completely locally funded as well. But again, since 2020, there have been 4 one-time bonuses provided to the deputies. Again, that has been a blend of comp board as well as locally approved positions as well. It was about $1.2 million. Again, you just approved the recruitment bonus of the $5,000. With the FY22 budget, you initiated the step pay plan. So the step pay plan allows a more predictable and transparent compensation program. So folks can look ahead that, provided obviously the budget is sound, what they'll be making year after year, rather than in the past our public safety employees were subject to the same requirements as our other employees, which was really dependent. It would change year to year. It might be 1% one year, 2% the next year, no percent. This would allow some of that predictability as you move forward as well. That action in 22 was accompanied by an additional 3% pay increase, which was first authorized locally and then also authorized at the state level as well. The state also granted an approval. So that was FY22. FY23, the current budget we're in now, you approved phase 2 of the phase 3 process, and that moved all of the deputies to the midpoint of their eventual location on the step pay plan. This was also accompanied by the 5% pay increase that just mentioned, as well as the compensation increases through action by the General Assembly. All things being equal, the FY24 budget proposal will include the final phase of implementation of the 3-phase step pay plan for the deputies, as it will for fire EMS, and of course I'll talk about police at the end of this. When all of this is complete, it will result in a starting pay for deputies increasing from what was when we started this of $37,375 to a new starting pay of $43,600. The range actually will go from $43,600 all the way up to $90,000. So that will be the range for deputy pay. That is an increase of $1.9 million in compensation between the FY22, FY24 area. So that's in addition, or additionally, the one-time bonuses that were mentioned. That's on top of that pay increase. So that's kind of the sheriff piece of this. I'm going to transition to the fire EMS side. Similarly, there have been 4 one-time bonuses provided to the fire EMS personnel. That was about $1.8 million in bonuses. I mentioned that they too have a recruitment bonus, a little bit different than fire and police, and working with the chief. He felt it would be most beneficial to have a bonus to be able to secure those that are already certified as paramedics, working someplace else perhaps, maybe not working yet, but have that certification. So there's a bonus of up to $7,000 to transfer those folks into our organization as well. With the FY22 budget, again, you approved both a new starting pay for fire EMS personnel, which actually has increased subsequent to that, and you established the step pay plan. Again, for the same purposes as I just mentioned with the sheriff. This action was accompanied by a 3% pay increase as well for the fire EMS personnel and placement at their minimum rank in each of the pay grade steps. With the FY23 budget, council approved implementation, just like you did with sheriff, of phase 2 of the 3 phases for the public safety plan. That moved everyone to the midpoint of where they'll ultimately land on that as well. And that too was accompanied by the 5% pay increase that was mentioned. Currently, administration is working with the chief and deputy chiefs to accelerate a part of phase 3 implementation. So phase 3 is scheduled to go into place with the FY24 budget. However, based on current revenues and how they're performing, we're looking at ways in which to accelerate the portion that affects paramedics. That's still an area that we're struggling with, still an area that the chief wants to kind of shore up a bit more. So we're working on moving some part of that forward as soon as January. We'll come to you before January, but the pay as soon as January as we move on. We'll continue to work with the chief and deputy chief on finalizing that information. And again, that will mostly affect firefighter 1 and firefighter 2 positions with the paramedic certification. Should be back in November or December with more details. There are also actions that we still need to take, similar to what we have with police, that as we go into finishing what we're going to do in FY24, that will change what I'm about to share with you as well, and change it probably so that there's more compensation. But the compensation ranges have gone before we started all this, our range of pay within the fire department was between $38,600 and $81,100. That was the range across the full spectrum, from basically the battalion chief down to the frontline firefighter 1. When this is finished in FY24, that will be at least, and again, I think this will actually go up some more as we continue to work with the chief on finalizing this, but that range will be at least $47,150 up to $96,995. So that's kind of the range. Again, that's a minimum. It could go up higher than that. That will result in an increase of at least $3 million in additional compensation between the years FY22 and FY24, in addition to the bonuses that I mentioned earlier. On the police side, again, similarly, since 2020, there have been 4 one-time bonuses provided to police personnel, worth about $1.5 million for those. There also have been, as I mentioned previously, recruitment and transfer bonuses approved to aid in recruitment efforts. And I can say, in a combination between those recruitment bonuses and the very hard work of Nick Comas, we have been very successful recently of getting transfers in, which is not something often that's easy to do within police agencies. And these folks have been transferring in from across the country. We've got a couple of folks that transferred in from New Mexico. I think there was one in from Arizona and a couple of others as well. Similar as with fire and with the sheriff, with the FY22 budget, council approved a new starting pay for police personnel and established the step pay plan. That was accompanied by the 3% pay increase as well. A little bit differently than the sheriff and the fire, because of the circumstances, both in an uptick in violence and also the large number of vacancies that were present. We worked with you all approved accelerating the step pay plan in the FY23 budget for the police department. So instead of it being a three-phased rollout in FY '21, '22, and, in '22, '23, and '24, it became a two-phase. So it was all completed in this fiscal year budget, and that was accompanied also by a 5% pay plan. Similarly, or in addition to that, as we rolled that final plan out and started engaging more with the officers in receipt of that, we felt there were still some additional needs that had to change, that had to increase, so additional compensation. It was expected that we would address that probably in the FY '24 budget, again, because of revenue performance. Instead, we're taking that action now. It actually will go into effect with the upcoming pay period, and I want to kind of walk through what some of that means. So what we've done is we've increased the pay for existing sergeants and lieutenants. So by the time this is completed, there will be no sergeant in our organization making less than $75,000 and no lieutenant in our organization making less than $84,000. In addition to that, we are also recognizing the tenure within the organization. So you all will remember in the step pay plan, you take into account the tenure at rank. So you're paid based on how long you've been a sergeant, how long you've been a senior police officer, and so on. But we also want to take into account how long you've also been in the organization. It's not a one-for-one ratio, but we've come up with a way in which to do that, which will further move officers that I just mentioned out even further into their pay plan. Those tenure-based adjustments will take place in January. So the ones that I just mentioned, which set that minimum for the current sergeants and the current lieutenants, that go into effect immediately. The other ones will go into effect in January. And again, that's the tenure spacing. Both of those we didn't anticipate being able to do till '24, but we've been able to do that. And I'll explain why we've been able to do that in just a second. All of that is to say where we've moved since FY '22 is from a range which was at that time, the pay in our police department ranged from $38,369 up to $84,742. So this is between the police officer 1 all the way up to captain. That range is now, when this is complete, will be $44,625 to $103,758. So that will be now the range of, and these are not pay grades, those are that's actual compensation. So that's actually what they're being compensated is between $44,625 and $103,758. That will result at the end of FY '24 in an increase of a little over $4 million in compensation increases. So when you add all of that together, bonuses, increases in starting pay, and the increases in the compensation due to the step pay plan, as I just mentioned, between FY '22 and FY '24, once that budget is approved, somewhere just north of $14 million in additional compensation has been provided for public safety. I want to say one thing on the police that has made this possible, just as I thanked certainly the governor and the General Assembly and what we were able to do with the sheriffs. Similarly, I want to thank them as well for the increase in funding, which you have been asking, and municipalities all across the state have been asking for many, many years. And at this last session, the HB 599 funding was increased for the first time in many, many years. And that actually has allowed us to accelerate what I just mentioned for the police. Every single cent of that HB 599 funding is being put into salaries for the police officers as we work our way. And it would not have been possible to do that this soon in the process without the assistance of that funding. Having said all of that, I want to make certain that though we certainly have placed rightfully a priority on increasing compensation for public safety across the board, and we're not quite finished. We'll be finishing that with FY '24. I don't want to forget the other employees that we have within the organization. You all know that we have undertaken a couple of compensation studies to prepare us for the FY '24 budget request. You've actually approved a small amount, but a certain amount of funding even in this year's budget that will allow us to address some of the critical issues. We have, again, a total of over 1,700 employees providing essential services ranging from E911 dispatch to foster care to cybersecurity to solid waste collection and so on. And we certainly need to make certain that we're addressing those issues. You took one of those steps when you increased our minimum wage in the organization so that no one part-time or full-time, makes less than $15 an hour. Many of those bonuses I mentioned for public safety, you also approved for the other employees as well. And of course, in the last 2 years, you've approved a 3% and 5% compensation increase for the employees. And you've approved budgets where we have not had to pass any of our health care costs increases, and they have been increasing onto the employees. We've been able to absorb those in the budget. However, those assessments that I mentioned that we've been doing for the employees, when we've recently reviewed a draft of the first one, indicate a need for somewhere between $5.5 million up to as much as $10 million just in base salary. That doesn't include fringe and additional compensation, just to place all of our non-public safety employees in a competitive position against the market. If we were to lead the market, those numbers go up to $10 to $15 million as we move forward. The estimated cost of the Department of Technology, so these are folks that take care of all of our technology, protect us from cybersecurity, or protect our cybersecurity and others. That department alone is probably $500,000. Social services can be anywhere between $1.4 and $2.3 million alone. So it's critical that alongside the aforementioned compensation increases for public safety personnel, we also provide the necessary compensation increases for our other employees. Otherwise, we will expect to see reductions in foster and elder care services, cybersecurity, E911 dispatch, solid waste collection, mowing our parks and rights-of-way, and so on. We'll be discussing a lot of that information at your November 29th budget planning retreat. We'll spend quite a bit of time actually going through that assessment in detail. You'll get information prior to that, but we'll dig deeper into that item as well. Obviously, you can tell from those costs, we will probably need to take an approach similar to what we have done with public safety, which is a multi-year kind of process. We're not going to be able to absorb those kinds of increases all in 1 year, certainly, as we were unable to do that even with public safety. But again, I just wanted to put, since you took the action regarding the deputies today, I wanted to put the rest of that in a bit of context and share with you kind of progress that has been made to date, work that still remains that will get hopefully finalized later this year as well as into the FY24, and then the big work that lies ahead for the FY24 and probably 25 and 26 budgets that lie ahead relative to the other parts of our organization and their compensation. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Bestpitch.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Cowell, for that very thorough and comprehensive review of what's happened. I just want to take this opportunity to go on the record to say that there's never been anybody on this council that said they wanted to defund the police. Never.
Never.
It's easy to say we support all of our law enforcement agencies, all of our public safety agencies, the Sheriff's Department, Fire EMS, the Police Department, and even the 911 call center. But people will quickly say, well, put your money where your mouth is. And I think we've done that. And I think the city is going to continue to do that going forward, just as you've outlined. And I appreciate also your comments about looking at the rest of the organization. I do think that's very important. And I just have to take one more opportunity to emphasize the importance of the folks in our social services department, especially those who are in child protective services, adult protective services, and foster care. Tremendously stressful jobs, making very important decisions, difficult decisions that have tremendous impact on people's lives. If we want to have the best and the brightest making those decisions, helping to keep families together whenever they can, intervening to protect children and adults when that is necessary, you know, we can't get by with what those folks have been paying. And I know there are other needs in other departments, but my career was in social work, so I'm going to say that I really think we need to give that you will give very serious consideration to that over the next year or so. Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bestpitch. Is there anyone else? Mr. Cobb. Mr.
Bob,
Cobb.
thank you for this summary. I think it's really helpful, not only for us to hear a recap of how critical we find this support, but over several years, which in government is pretty quick to address these compensation issues. But even more than that, I think we're working to address the environment within which public safety works to make sure, and all of our employees, to make sure that's more equitable. I think our comprehensive plan, our departmental efforts to address equity, not only in compensation, but in a safe and healthy work environment is starting to bear fruit. And we obviously still have work to do, but all of that's important. And I just want to remind citizens that, all of this works together. Our employees deliver essential services. And in order to receive these essential services, we have to support these essential services through our budget. And so I encourage citizens to think about how our budget is funded. Most of that is through taxes. And we want to deliver the best, but we need our citizens to acknowledge and support that in delivering our best. And so the investment that citizens make through the budget, through taxes, through our underfunding sources, oftentimes that come from the state or sometimes the federal government, they all work together. And so just remembering that balance of supporting our employees, also make sure we deliver the highest quality essential services we can. And it all benefits us as a city, and it certainly, first and foremost, benefits our citizens. So, thank you, Bob, for reminding us of all of that.
Thank you. And again, I want to thank you all too, because obviously we can't provide this support without your approvals, and so certainly appreciate that. And then, of course, most importantly, I want to thank, whether they're deputies, whether they're working in the jail, whether they're working at the courthouse, the police officers, as well as the fire EMS personnel. These are all folks that are working, as many of our employees are, under pretty extraordinary circumstances with a lot of stress and pressure. And so I appreciate being able to help them in this way, and really your support in doing so. So thank you.
Mr. Cowell, I will echo what Mr. Bespich said. I like that, putting your money where your mouth is. That speaks volumes. The only question I had was on the compensation study. Have you had a chance to unpack that, or are we going to hear about that at a later?
You'll certainly get information on it before the November 29th meeting. We're still processing it, so HR is actually going through right now and beginning to craft recommendations based off of the draft, so that they can share with us how they would recommend that we kind of tackle this. And again, some part of it may happen this year because there's a small amount of money that was set aside to deal with really critical items, and then the rest of it's going to be part of our discussion as we go into the FY24. But yes, we'll share information with you so you're as prepared going into the 29th as you can.
Okay, so we will get some before then. I'm certainly looking forward to the budget retreat myself. This is going to be fun, a lot of work, but we've got some good things ahead of us. Thank you so much for that. Okay. All right. Well, I took Ms. Moon's question. We good? Okay. Well, we will move on then to number 8, reports of committees. And we have a report of the Roanoke City School Board requesting appropriation of funds for various educational programs, and a report of the city manager recommending that council concur in this request. Donna Caldwell is a spokesperson, and I don't see Donna here, but there is one measure, and it is a budget ordinance.
Move the budget ordinance.
Madam Clerk, could you read the title paragraph?
An ordinance to appropriate funding from the Commonwealth federal and private grant for various educational programs, amending and reordaining certain sections of the 2022-2023 school fund appropriations, and dispensing with the second reading by title of this ordinance.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I would ask our clerk to call the roll.
Ms. Moon Reynolds?
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Mr. Cobb?
Aye.
And Vice Mayor White Boyd.
Aye, and the budget ordinance passes. A report of certain authorities, boards, committees, and commissions in the city, in which city council member serves as a liaison or appointees. Are there any reports from your committees? Or I know you guys are hardworking, but no reports at this time. Okay, we'll move on to item 9, unfinished business. There is none. Item 10, introduction and consideration of ordinances and resolution. We have none. Item 11, motions and miscellaneous business. Number 1, inquiries and/or comments by the mayor, who is not here, and members of city council. Mr. Bestfitch, you want to go?
Well, for many years, I've had concerns about naming some of our public plazas after whatever business happened to be next door, usually a bank. And we have one more plaza that has not really gotten the recognition that I think it should. Some of you remember, I'm sure, that Roanoke in the 1920s was one of the first cities to really develop a city plan. And that was done under the guidance of somebody by the name of John Nolan. So unless there's any objection from any other council members, I would like to ask the city attorney to draft the appropriate measure to name the plaza that's bounded by Salem Avenue, Market Street, and Norfolk Avenue on 3 sides, the plaza where we usually have our Christmas tree every holiday season, in honor of John Nolan, and at some point that the city would erect an appropriate interpretive panel so people know who John Nolan was, what he did, and how forward-thinking Roanoke has been since that time. Thank you, Madam.
Is there, what are we calling that plaza now?
Wells Fargo.
Wells
Plaza.
Fargo, that was the Wells Fargo.
And if I may, it is actually, one of the recommendations in the adopted downtown plan is to name that plaza after John Nolan. So this is supported by previous policy action as well.
I'd just like to get it done.
Thank you, Mr. Bestfitch. Ms. Moon Reynolds?
Thank you. I wanted to talk a little bit about some citizens who had contacted me with regards to the Spring Hollow water supply. After being contacted, I reached out, after reading, I also read the Roanoke Times newspaper article about this hazardous substance that was detected in the river near the Spring Hollow Reservoir. I spoke with the city manager briefly about what I had heard to get his input on it, and then I went and talked with Mike McEnvoy, who is the executive director of the Western Virginia Water Authority. And he referenced it as a Gen Z contaminant that mainly affected the residents in Roanoke County and the neighboring localities. It was also noted that Roanoke City is not affected since we receive our water supply from Carvin's Cove Reservoir, which at that time was also tested, did not test positive for any forever chemicals. Mr. McEnvoy did mention sharing a particular presentation with the Roanoke County Board of Supervisors, I guess a couple of weeks or so ago. And even though, make sure I got my notes, even though this contamination does not directly affect our water source, I would like to, without objection by the council, I would like to ask the city manager to contact Mr. McEnvoy and arrange for a similar presentation to be at our November the 21st council meeting. And lastly, if any city resident should have any questions or any desire to have additional information, that they can contact the Western Virginia Water Authority, and that number is 540-283-2934. Thank you.
If I could also remind folks that might be interested in it, the Water Authority board meetings, of course, are public and open to the public as well. They can go onto the website and they'll see when they meet, late afternoons as well. So certainly that's another avenue they can go to as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moon Reynolds. I certainly appreciate the increased level of awareness, just making our residents aware. I would also reiterate that this does not impact the city of Roanoke, that our water is safe, and we appreciate everything that the Western Virginia Water Authority does to make sure that our drinking water is safe. But thank you for bringing that. And we'll move on to item number 2, vacancies on certain authorities, boards, commissions, and committee-appointed council. There is none. So we'll move on to our final item, 12. The council will stand in recess for a closed meeting in council's conference room, and we'll convene thereafter at 7 p.m. So we are in, well, I thought you had a question. You're signing off? Okay, we are in recess.